So let's start with the OG Lost Planet, which dropped originally as an Xbox 360 exclusive back in 2006 in Japan. And the reason Capcom specifically targeted 360 was because they wanted to flex their new MT framework engine with crazy particle effects, volumetric smoke, and insane boss battles. And to be honest, it was a big deal at the time. Like, they even licensed the famous actor Lee Byung-hun to play the main character Wayne Holden, hoping to capture a global audience. And the story here is just 2000s anime nonsense, and I kinda love it, you know. We're placed 150 years after humanity first got its butt kicked by the Acrid, a race of reptilian insectoids, on Eden 3. Wayne and his father Gale are part of a squad running for their lives from a terrifying Acrid known as the Green Eye. Gale ends up sacrificing himself in a mech suit to save Wayne, but Wayne gets knocked out and frozen solid. He wakes up with a classic case of video game amnesia and is rescued by a group of snow pirates Yuri, Luca, and Rick. These guys are surviving on the fringes, fighting off both the Acrid and the militarized forces called Nevik. Wayne discovers he has this special device attached to his arm called a harmonizer, which basically heals his wounds using the tenge he collects from dead bugs. And then from there, the plot's a straightforward revenge and a rebellion story. Wayne wants to remember his past and avenge his dad, while also stopping Nevik's frontier project. You see, Nevik is run by this absolute prick named Commander Eisenberg, who wants to exterminate all the Acrid and terraform the planet for an elite group of rich humans. So like, Wayne goes on a one-man rampage, and along the way things get dark. His buddy Yuri gets captured by Nevik, eventually dying just after handing Wayne an upgrade for his harmonizer that lets him pilot the most powerful mechs in the game. Another character literally sacrifices herself to buy Wayne some time, while a guy named Joe blows up Nevik's main elevator. It all leads up to this final showdown where Wayne fights Eisenberg in space-age mechs, shoots him in the head, and passes out. When Wayne finally wakes up, he finds out his friends successfully activated a terraforming device to melt the planet's ice, allowing humanity to colonize in peace. It's a happy ending wrapped up in a bunch of explosions.
Wayne, I wish you could be here to see this.
Now let's talk about the gameplay, because this is where I believe the game actually shines, but also where it shows its age today. Lost Planet is basically an arcade shooter at its core, and the most defining mechanic is the tenge drain. Because the planet's so unbelievably cold, your harmonizer is constantly burning through your thermal energy just to keep you alive. The number at the top of your screen is always ticking down, and if it hits 0, your health starts draining extremely fast. This then forces you to play aggressively. You can't just hide behind cover like a coward. You gotta run out there, blast Acrid, blow up explosive barrels, and activate data posts to suck up that sweet orange juice to stay alive. It gives the entire game this frantic pacing that feels incredibly rewarding when you get in the zone. And when on foot, you fight using typical weapons like assault rifles, shotguns, and energy weapons. But the real highlight here are the Vital Suits, or VS. These are big, clunky, badass mechs that you can hop into. And what makes these mechs so cool is that they are totally modular. Like, if your mech is taking too much damage, you can just rip the giant gun or rocket launcher right off its arm and carry it around on foot like an absolute unit. It slows your walking speed to a crawl, but the sheer destructive power is off the charts. And you also get a grappling hook, which is pretty clunky and doesn't reach very far, but it lets you scale buildings and pull yourself out of danger. So the enemies here are mostly the Acrid, and don't know how to put it, but the enemy design is very Capcom-like, you know. They are huge, terrifying, and have these glowing yellow weak spots that just scream, "Shoot me here." But fighting these giant bugs is actually way more fun than fighting human enemies, who mostly just try to knock you over with rocket launchers. Also, the boss fights are big and memorable, like fighting that giant moth-like Acrid or the infamous Green Eye that killed your dad. So overall, the OG Lost Planet is totally worth your time. It's a solid single-player action game, and there's a lot of charm in how unapologetic it is about being an arcade shooter. But then we get to Lost Planet 2, which released in 2010, and oh boy, Capcom decided to completely throw everything that worked in OG Lost Planet out the window. So basically, around this time, Capcom was looking at the insane success of their own Monster Hunter franchise in Japan and the popularity of co-op shooters like Gears of War in the West, and they decided to just mash them together. Lost Planet 2 abandoned the single-player, story-driven focus of the first game and mutated into a 4-player co-op boss rush spectacle. Not gonna lie, this shift alienated a lot of hardcore fans, but it also created one of the most uniquely ambitious co-op games ever. So the story is set 10 years after the first game. Because Wayne and his buddies melted the ice at the end of the first game, the planet's no longer just a frozen wasteland. It has now completely transformed with lush jungles, dry deserts, and deep oceans. And because of this climate shift, the Acrid have evolved and mutated into these variants called Category G or Cat G Acrid. And these things hold unbelievable amounts of tension. So now, instead of following one main character like Wayne, the plot's broken up into 6 different episodes, and in each episode, you play as a completely different faction of humans fighting for survival.
Carpetbaggers are gonna get away with a railway gun.
So let me quickly break down this crazy episodic structure for you because it's all over the place. In episode 1, you play as a group of mercenaries sneaking through some jungle. You then get ambushed, steal some mechs, and end up fighting this big 6-legged Cat G Acrid called the Gordient. And guys, this fight is pretty legendary. You can literally get eaten, run around inside shooting its internal organs, and then get pooped out the back end. I'm not even making this up. Then, in episode 2, you play as a Black Ops team called Task Force First Descent, working for the new version of Nevik. It turns out these guys are all clones of a character from the first game, and they're sent to a city to steal a super weapon called the Railway Gun. Of course, a giant Acrid called Acrid X attacks and chaos ensues. Episode 3 then switches to a group called the Waysiders. They're riding a train across a desert trying to escape with some stolen Tenj when they get attacked by the Red Eye, which is basically a giant sandworm the size of a skyscraper. You then run around the train, load artillery shells into a cannon, and shoot the worm while it tries to swallow the train whole. Episode 4 follows ex-Nevik defectors who break into an underwater base, blow up a fancy submarine mech, and hijack a space shuttle heading for a space station called Neos. Episode 5 puts you in the shoes of a group of bandits who hijack an overland battleship and then decide to go hunt down the biggest Acrid on the planet, known as the Over-G. And finally, in episode 6, all the factions realize that this Over-G Acrid is gonna destroy the entire planet. So in a super anime moment, they all decide to team up. So the ex-Nevik guys unite everyone, the ground troops then plant GPS trackers on the giant beast, and the clone soldiers up in the Neo space station literally crash the entire station into the planet to kinda like nuke the Over-G from orbit, sacrificing themselves in the process. The explosion fills the oceans with Tenj, and everyone lives happily ever after as a united planet.
Can't believe it. Look at it all. What happened?
As you can tell, the story is a total cluster. There's no character development, no emotional attachment, and half the time you have no idea why you're shooting the things you're shooting. But honestly, the game doesn't care. It just wants to give you an excuse to fight giant monsters with your friends. And the gameplay was heavily tweaked to support this co-op focus. Because the planet's warmer, your Tenj no longer drains constantly just to keep you alive. Instead, it acts like a shared mana pool. You use Tenj to pilot mechs, fire energy weapons, and most importantly, heal yourself. The vital suits also got some upgrades. Now there are mechs that require multiple people to operate. One player drives while the other 2 use the guns. But playing Lost Planet 2 by yourself is an absolute torture. If you don't have friends to play with like me, the game gives you AI companions, and these AI bots are dumber than a bag of rocks. They don't know how to revive you, they don't know how to activate data posts, and they certainly don't know how to shoot the weak spots. To make matters worse, the game uses a shared battle gauge life system. Every time someone dies, the gauge drops. And if it hits 0, it's game over for the whole team. So this brain-dead AI will constantly run into danger, die, and drain your entire team's lives, causing you to fail the mission through no fault of your own. So if you play it solo, it feels like an unfair, frustrating mess. It's a game that relies entirely on the social experience to function. You can just skip this one, to be honest. So after the polarizing reception of Lost Planet 2, Capcom found themselves at a crossroads. By 2013, the gaming market was completely dominated by narrative-heavy cover shooters. Think games like Gears of War or The Uncharted. Capcom, in their infinite corporate wisdom, decided they needed to westernize the franchise. So they completely outsourced the development to a studio in California called Spark Unlimited and forced them to use Unreal Engine 3 instead of their in-house MT Framework engine. And to be honest, this decision alone changed the entire DNA of the series. Lost Planet 3 isn't a fast-paced arcade shooter, and it isn't a chaotic co-op boss rush. It's a slow, methodical, story-driven prequel that tries really hard to be a survival horror game. For me, the story is probably the only best part of this game. It's set 50 years before the events of the very first game. It starts off with an elderly man trapped under a collapsed icy cave, slowly dying. His granddaughter Diana finds him, and he decides to tell her the story of his life. This old man is Jim Payton, the main character. He isn't a super soldier, he isn't a badass anime protagonist with amnesia. Jim's just a regular blue-collar guy with a beard, a wife, and a kid back on Earth. He took a dangerous contract job working for the earliest version of Nevik just to pay the bills and send money home to his family. So when Jim arrives, Nevik presents itself as a completely normal, friendly construction company trying to solve Earth's energy crisis by mining tench. But things quickly go wrong. Jim discovers an abandoned base proving that Nevik lied and that they're actually not the first humans on the planet. While trying to escape, a giant acrid destroys his rig and Jim nearly freezes to death. He's saved by a woman named Mira, who introduces him to a secret tribe of survivors. Jim slowly realizes that the Nevik scientist named Dr. Kendrick Kovac and a ruthless commander named Eisenberg are conducting sick experiments to weaponize the acrid. He then eventually teams up with the expedition's director Phil Braddock and a nerdy technician named Gale to sabotage Nevik. The story hits really hard when Eisenberg drops the facade, murders Mira's father, and takes Jim's family hostage. In the final act, Braddock sacrifices his own life so Jim can rescue his family, and Jim absolutely destroys Eisenberg in a final confrontation, completely ruining Nevik's plans. After the dust settles, they all decide to stay on the planet. Gale uses his research to invent the Harmonizer, the magical healing device from the first game, and the group officially dubs themselves the very first Snow Pirates. Look, the narrative here is genuinely fantastic. Like throughout the game, he gets video and audio messages from his wife back on Earth, and listening to them talk about their struggles, their kid, and how much they miss each other gives the game this emotional core that the previous games completely lacked. The voice acting is top-notch, and the music playing in Jim's rig feels like listening to a space trucker's personal playlist.
May you live to see the end of this. Forgive me.
Please don't.
But then we get to the gameplay, and oh boy, the gameplay is a letdown. They completely stripped away those vital suits and replaced them with this utility rig. It's an incredibly slow piece of construction equipment. When you get inside, the camera shifts to a claustrophobic first-person view. You don't have rockets or Gatling guns, you have a drill and a mechanical claw. And whenever an acrid attacks your rig, you don't really fight it. Instead, you're forced into the scripted quick-time events. You press a button to block, wait for an opening, grab the monster with your claw, and hold the drill button to kill it. It's repetitive, it's boring, and it completely strips away any kind of player agency. And when on foot, the game turns into a generic third-person shooter. You hide behind cover, pop out, shoot some bugs with some weak-feeling guns, and move on. The weapons have no punch, and the enemy variety is lacking. Furthermore, they completely changed how thermal energy works. Tenj is literally just space money now. You collect it from dead bugs to buy upgrades at a shop in the hub world. Yep, that's right, they turned it into a pseudo-RPG. You walk around the base, talk to NPCs, pick up boring side quests, and do a ridiculous amount of backtracking over and over again. And the level design is painfully bad, filled with invisible walls. So, while the story and the atmosphere is fantastic, the actual act of playing the game is a total grind. It's a game that completely betrayed the identity of the franchise, and it ended up killing the series entirely. And after this game flopped, Capcom left the franchise in the graveyard. So here we are today looking back at this insane trilogy. What's the final verdict? Well, you gotta realize that Lost Planet isn't really a cohesive series. It's a prime example of a publisher having zero idea what they wanted their IP to be. Every single game is a radical departure from the last. It represents an era where developers were willing to take risks, even if those risks ended up alienating their own fanbase. Anyways, that's everything you need to know about the Lost Planet games. Let me know down in the comments which one was your favorite, or if you even remember playing these back in the day. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.